Hey, Aimee and I have been living in Japan for 4 months now, and as you may know, every country has a different way of doing things. We're going to share with you some life and travel tips that will make your first trip to Japan that little bit easier.
These won't necessarily be do's and don'ts when you come to Japan, but instead just practical tips and advice so that you look a little bit more like a local. Our first tip for when you're coming to Japan is bring cash or have a way to access cash. Let's hear it again for those people in the back. Make sure you have a lot of cash when you're traveling in Japan. Whilst the country is moving towards using card more, it's still very much a cash-based society. You'll find that when you're traveling to a rural area in Japan, or even restaurants, smaller shops, and hotels, you'll only be able to use cash and not credit cards there. This really caught us out when we were traveling to a rural area in Nagano just last week. We thought because we were going to a ski resort, we'd be able to pay for things like a lift pass and our rental gear with credit card, but we were very sorely mistaken. Not only did all the restaurants, shops, and hotels in the area only take cash, but the nearest convenience store with an ATM was a good 40-minute walk away, so we needed to make that walk so we could get cash out. Were we incredibly stupid? Yes. Can you learn from our mistakes? 100%. If you'd like to check out our time in Nagano, you can click up the top of the video, but if you take nothing else from this video here, please make sure that you travel around Japan with a little bit more cash than you need. Budget out what you think you're going to need to travel around Japan, and then have a few extra 10,000 yen in your wallet just in case. Like I said before, Japan is slowly starting to embrace credit card more, and there are places where you will be able to use your card, such as konbinis, shops, and bigger restaurants. If you need to get cash out while you're in Japan, 7-Eleven ATMs are your best bet. They take many different foreign credit cards, and you're able to select English or another foreign language to see the menu in.
On the topic of money, tip number 2. When you're going to be paying for anything in a shop in Japan, rather than handing your cash or card directly to the cashier, instead, you're supposed to put it in a tray that will be sitting on top of the counter. This is seen as more respectful, and it's actually easier for the cashier to count the money that you've given them. However, when you're going to be receiving your change, the cashier will place your change or card directly back into your hands. Speaking of money, let's save some. Tip number 3. How can you eat cheaply in Japan? Japan has lots of great places where you can find a cheap and convenient feed. First up, we're talking about the gyudon chain restaurants. We're talking about places like Sukiya, Yoshinoya, Nakao, and Matsuya. They all pretty much serve the same kind of stuff. It's basically a bowl of rice with some meat on top. It's absolutely delicious, and it only costs 500 yen. When you go to these places, you'll notice that there's 2 ways of paying for your meal. The first is going to a vending machine. You pay at the vending machine, you receive your ticket, and don't worry, I guarantee that the machine will be in English. The next is having a waiter come to your table, just like in any other restaurant. Once your meal arrives, the waiter will give you a receipt, and then you take that receipt to the front counter when you've finished your meal and you pay there. If you arrive at one of these fast food joints and you don't know what to do, don't panic, just sit back and watch what the locals are doing and copy that. This can be applied to everything we talk about in this video. If you're ever unsure, just take a step back and watch what the locals do. Konbinis are another great place to have a cheap and convenient meal. These places have a wide range of ready-to-go meals to choose from, and they're all generally under 1,000 yen. Even better, when you go to pay for your meal, the cashier will ask if you'd like it heated up. Additionally, some of these places have a seating area where you can go and sit down and eat your meal and then continue on exploring.
Okay, moving on from eating in Japan, our 4th tip is all about using trains in Japan. I'm sure that you've already heard many different things about trains in Japan. Probably that you should not talk too much on the trains and that you cannot use your phones on the trains in Japan. One thing that you may not have heard of though is that when you're using a train and it's very busy, you should put your backpack on the front of you. People in Japan do this because the trains can get very busy, and if you have your backpack on your back, then you're very likely to go and hit someone unknowingly with your bag. Another small bonus tip is that the trains, particularly in Tokyo, around peak hour, so from 8 to 9:30 in the morning and 5 to 7:30 at nighttime, can be very, very busy. I have personally experienced this myself, And honestly, it's like being at a music festival and being held up by other people. You just cannot move. So if you have a lot of luggage, if you're traveling in Japan, it's definitely advised to miss the trains at this time of the day. One last tip for using trains in Japan is we'd recommend getting an IC card or a rechargeable card so that you don't have to use paper tickets everywhere you go. There's two different kinds that you can get in Tokyo. You can get either Passmo, which is from private railway companies in Tokyo, or Suica, which is from the JR East Company. These are really great because you don't have to worry about paper tickets. You just take your rechargeable card and tap on and off at every station. There's the normal Suica and Passmo cards that people living in Japan use. Suica in particular can be used in Tokyo, and then it can also be used in other areas in Japan like Kyoto. These normal ones you do have to pay a deposit for, but at the end of your trip you can go and get the money back from the card that you've been using. In comparison, since 2019 there has been a welcome Suica card, which you don't need to pay the 500 yen deposit for, and it only lasts for 28 days, so it can be great for travelers. The only difference with this is that you cannot get any money that you've put on your card back at the end of your trip. So you need to be a little bit careful when you're topping up your card.
Next up is tip number 5, SIM cards. As you might know, there's two options for internet in Japan, pocket Wi-Fi or SIM cards. Aimee and I, we went for SIM cards. Aimee went with Sakura Mobile, which was a data-only SIM. It was a little bit more expensive, but it allowed tethering. I went with Mobile, which was a data and voice SIM. And it was the only one that we could find for foreigners coming to Japan. Both services were foreigner friendly, they were really easy, and we were able to order them online and then have them scheduled for pickup as soon as we arrived at the airport.
Tip number 6 for what you need to know before coming to Japan is that if you're going to be driving in Japan, you need to be careful of cyclists on the road. In Japan, riding bikes is a really big part of their culture. You'll see many Japanese people riding their bike to the train station to go to work, or maybe to the grocery store to go shopping. As a result of this, cyclists are given a lot of consideration on the road, probably more than in many other countries around the world. So if you're going to be driving in Japan, particularly in cities, make sure that you're thinking of this and give a lot of consideration to cyclists. If you're thinking about driving in Japan at all, or maybe even camper vanning, we made a video all about camper vanning and the free rest stops around Japan, so you can click to check it out. Tip number 7 is all about pricing in Japan. If you've been to Japan before, then you will have noticed that on many goods, items and services, there's always a main price in big bold letters, and then there's a smaller price which is actually the price with the tax included. So you need to be careful of this and know how much you're actually going to be paying with tax. Another thing to look out for is in hotels and accommodation, there may be the main price and then extras on top. For example, if you're staying in an accommodation with an onsen, there'll usually be an onsen tax. And if you're staying somewhere in wintertime, there's usually a heating tax that may be something like 400 yen per person per day added on top. Alright, so thinking about ways to travel around Japan, our 8th tip is all about the Shinkansen, or the bullet train. As a foreigner visiting Japan as a tourist, you're entitled to the Japan Rail Pass, which is essentially a pass you can get for 7 days, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, where you pay one block amount of money and you can travel on the Shinkansen or any JR trains as much as you like. The 7-day Japan Rail Pass costs about 300,000 yen, and I know it's a popular choice for tourists coming to Japan. My tip for this video though is really assess where you're going to be traveling when you're in Japan and whether you actually need the Japan Rail Pass. If you're staying relatively within one area, or you're only going to be doing maybe one long trip, for example between Tokyo and Osaka on the Shinkansen, then it's probably not worth getting the Japan Rail Pass. For example, for someone living in Japan, it costs about 15,000 yen to go from Tokyo to Osaka on the Shinkansen. So as you can see, if you got the 7-day Japan Rail Pass, you're actually wasting money if you're only doing that one trip. Now of course, when you travel, if you're all about convenience, then sure, go for it, get the Japan Rail Pass. But if you're looking to save some money, we would suggest instead maybe looking into a highway bus. they're maybe not the most convenient and comfortable, but you save a heap of money. For example, from Tokyo to Osaka, again, the Shinkansen's 15,000 yen approximately, but a highway bus might only cost you 3,000 yen, so you save a heap of money. If you'd like to know more about the highway buses in Japan, you can click up here to check out a video that we did on it. But for sure, I would definitely look into this and see whether the Japan Rail Pass is going to be convenient for you. If you're interested about traveling around Japan or lifestyle in Japan, check out our other videos on our channel. We're uploading new videos every week. Until then, we'll see you next time.